Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the History and Heritage webinar. We've got several presentations for you today, one from the Scottish Land Fund, one from Historic Environment Scotland, and one from Heritage Lottery Fund. And then what we will do is round off with a question and answer session. We might run over our advertised hour-long slot. Don't worry if you need to leave, as this will be recorded and published on YouTube so you can listen back. Questions can be asked at any time on the right hand side of your screen in the questions box, and I would encourage you to send in as many questions as possible to make sure the question and answer session is as good as possible. Speaking today, we've got Ailsa Rayburn, who's the Head of Community Assets here at Highlands and Islands Enterprise. We have Diane Gray, who's a Development Manager at Heritage Lottery Fund. Pauline Megson, who's also a Development Manager, but with Historic Environment Scotland. Thomas Knowles, who's the Head of Grants at Historic Environment Scotland, and Tony Crosby, who is the SLF Operations Manager. Coming to you first, we have Ailsa Rayburn, who will be talking about the Scottish Land Fund.
That's great, thanks Ailey. Hi everybody, as Ailey says, my name is Ailsa Rayburn. I'm the head of the Community Assets team for Highlands and Islands Enterprise. I'm based over in Loch in Argyll. I'd like to thank Ailey for setting everything up here and doing all the techie stuff, particularly to colleagues in Historic Environment Scotland, Heritage Lottery Fund for their time today. We decided to go ahead with this webinar and asked our colleagues to join us, particularly because for the Scottish Land Fund we've got lots of projects now coming forward with a heritage component, so they can be historic buildings in all sorts of states of repair across the whole of Scotland, and it's very timely for us now. We're getting more and more referrals of buildings and assets which do have some heritage interest, to see how we can work better with our colleagues in other funding agencies to support clients. So if you're happy just to click on, thanks Ailey. So the Scottish Land Fund, quite a few of you will have heard this before, so I'll skip through it fairly quickly. But for those of you that haven't come across the Scottish Land Fund yet, this is a fund which is delivered in partnership by Highlands and Islands Enterprise and the Big Lottery Fund on behalf of the Scottish Government, and it's across the whole of Scotland. A Big Lottery and HIE have got long experience of working together, supporting and funding communities to buy, develop and manage community assets. And it's the UK's largest grant maker, which is Big Lottery, working with the UK's most effective and experienced community asset development organisation, HIE. And Big Lottery have been around for quite a number of years. They were obviously called one of the other lottery organisations previously, and HIE, we've just celebrated our 50th anniversary. Thanks, Ailey. So, Scottish Land Fund, some key background information. It's a 4-year programme. This is the third iteration of the fund. The Scottish Government have allocated £10 million per annum. For those of you that know how Scottish Government funding works, it's an annual budget at the moment. So we have to wait each December to confirm whether or not we have a budget for the following year. But for the first 2 years of the programme, Scottish Government have awarded £10 million. It's a 2-stage process, and the first stage is to confirm project and applicant eligibility, and applicants can also apply for some development funding to help with some of the technical and feasibility work required to establish a strong case. And the second stage supports acquisition costs and post-acquisition development. So you can apply for a maximum grant of £1 million under the fund, and you can apply for a maximum of £100,000 revenue. That's pre and post acquisition, and that's for up to a period of 3 years. The Scottish Land Fund is about more than money. One of the important and I think quite valued elements of the fund is the case officer support that Scottish Government funds as part of the programme. This case officer support is available across the whole of Scotland, and there will be somebody local to you who will come to you and talk about your project. It's critical early stage development work to help projects develop, help groups build their skills and capacity, and for the fund to develop really strong, sustainable projects that have the best chance of success at committee. So as I say, there are case officers throughout Scotland, and once you make the referral to the Scottish Land Fund, then you'll be allocated a case officer who will come and talk to you about your project. Thanks, Ailey. So the Scottish Land Fund is looking for projects to deliver against 3 outcomes. These outcomes are based on the embedded Scottish Government policy agenda around empowering communities through asset ownership. The first outcome that we're looking for projects to deliver, that communities will achieve more sustainable economic, environmental and or social development through the ownership of land and buildings. So this is all about addressing need in a community, a particular need that's been identified, and how this asset, acquiring and owning this asset, will help address that need. So it's certainly not about maintaining the status quo, it's not about protecting sites against development, and it's not about saving historic buildings per se. The fund is also looking for communities who acquire and manage assets to have a stronger role in and control over their own development. So this is all around empowering communities to make decisions about their future, enabling greater community engagement and allowing for opportunities for volunteering. And the third outcome that we're looking for is that communities own well-managed, financially sustainable land and buildings. So as part of the case officer work with an applicant, we'll be looking for community groups to develop good, strong governance, to make sure that they've got the right skills to develop and manage an asset, that they've got strong community support for the project, and that what they're acquiring is an asset and not a liability. And we're looking for business plans as part of the project development that demonstrate long-term sustainability. So just in terms of the projects that we've funded to date, thanks Ailey, we've had a huge number of referrals. I won't go through all of these, but you can see the amount of interest. This is across the whole of Scotland, and these are projects, referrals that we've been working with since April 2016. So 54 projects so far have received stage 1 funding, and this is the funding, the pre-acquisition development costs. So it's things like developing a feasibility study, surveys, valuations, and bringing in other professional support to help you build a good, strong case for acquisition. And we've got at the moment 180 projects in the pipeline, and they range from big crofting estates in Lewis to listed factories in the centre of some of our central belt towns, to shops, to former theatres, swimming pools, any sort of asset type we will look at. Okay, thanks Hayley. So as I've already outlined, the focus for the Scottish Land Fund is on empowering communities through asset ownership and using those assets to deliver against community need. And it's an opportunity to take important buildings into community control, which will help deliver against that need. All Scottish Land Fund projects require a sustainable business case. So again, this is underlining that we're looking for projects and communities to be acquiring assets and not liabilities. And therefore we look at each application and we assess it on its merit, its delivery of the outcomes that we're looking for, but also against the risk to the applicant. And you will all appreciate, if you're involved with historic assets, that there's a spectrum of risks. So some buildings and assets are in reasonable condition and can be used for what we would call meantime uses, so can be immediately brought into use and start delivering against some of the community needs. And other projects that we're seeing are buildings in an extremely poor state of repair and that need huge amounts of post-acquisition development support to enable them to deliver against the outcomes and the needs that have been identified. So I'm really pleased today that we've got colleagues from Historic Environment Scotland and Heritage Lottery Fund who will talk you through what some of those funding programmes are, and at the end Tony will just talk you through briefly about how we really want to start approaching some of these projects and applications that we're receiving to hopefully provide a better support to clients, particularly in the earliest stages of development. So if I can hand over to Diane Gray from Heritage Lottery Fund, and Diane is going to talk through HLF's objectives and the sorts of funding that they have available. Thanks, Diane.
Thanks very much, Elsa. I'm very happy to be speaking to everyone this morning. Thank you to Highlands and Islands Enterprise for the invite to be involved in this session. I am just going to bring up my presentation. Okay, so I'm going to talk through about a dozen slides this morning to tell you a bit about who the Heritage Lottery Fund are, what is important to us and what we take into consideration when we're distributing the funding, and to touch on a few of our grant programs that I think are most relevant to the area that we're focusing on this morning. So firstly, who are the Heritage Lottery Fund? We are a national lottery funder. We distribute money raised through the sale of national lottery tickets to support heritage projects of all types and sizes. We distribute grants from £3,000 and upwards. And we try to show the value and the importance of heritage through the projects that we support, whether that's supporting young people to explore the outdoors, restoring and rejuvenating our parks, preserving records and objects from the past, passing on skills and traditions that will sustain our heritage, or supporting our built historic environment for the future. So supporting a very wide range of projects. What is heritage? Very often we get asked this at events that we go to. So I guess just to clear that up in terms of our view, we don't define it. The Heritage Lottery Fund doesn't attempt to define heritage. We ask people to tell us what their heritage is, what is important to them in terms of their heritage. The UNESCO definition is that heritage is our legacy from the past, what we live with today, what we want to pass on to future generations. And I guess essentially heritage is what makes us who we are. But as I say, here at the Heritage Lottery Fund, we don't define it. We ask people to tell us. What we are seeking to support is projects that make a lasting difference for heritage, for people, and for communities. And we hold those three different aspects and elements. We hold them all, consider them all to be very important. We ask people to tell us how their project is going to make a difference, make a change, and deliver benefits. And we have 14 different outcomes that we want to support through the projects that we fund, and they're grouped under these three areas of heritage, people, and communities. I guess the key measure, and in considering whether to bring a project to us or not, is to consider whether the project achieves against these outcomes and whether the project is viable, whether it's deliverable, and whether it can be sustained for the future. So the outcomes are incredibly important to us. So I'm just going to take a little bit of time and go through those. The first group, as I say, is for heritage. And firstly, that heritage would be better managed as a result of the project. So perhaps new maintenance and management plans and actions being put in place. The test, I guess, that the heritage should be more secure for the future, perhaps meeting sectoral or national standards. The second outcome in this group is that heritage would be in better condition as a result of the project. So the heritage is in better physical condition, and again, that would be confirmed through achieving standards or perhaps by recognition of visitors to your site. The third, that heritage would be better interpreted and explained, helping people to make sense of the heritage so that they understand it better and have a better experience of it. And the last outcome in this group is that heritage would be better identified or recorded, that heritage that is perhaps currently hidden or not very accessible is uncovered, located, made available to people in a way that it wasn't before. So perhaps uncovering records or collections in a local area, perhaps recording information on species and habitats in a way, or information that wasn't available before, or surveys of our built heritage, understanding the heritage in a new way, and making it accessible to people in a way that it wasn't before. The second group of outcomes that we have are about people. And the first is developing skills that people would have developed, a competence or a knowledge or a skill that would perhaps lead to a qualification, but that skill is recognised in some way. The second outcome is that people would have learned about heritage, helping people to gain knowledge and understanding by providing opportunities to learn which are suitable for the people that you're trying to engage, suits their needs and their interests. The third one is about changing attitudes and behaviours, which sometimes surprises people, but it's about changing how people people think about our heritage, changing perhaps their outlook and their view of heritage and indeed of the world around them, and influencing what they do. Then perhaps people take actions and get involved in a new way. That hopefully the projects are fun, interesting, enjoyable, and rewarding. That meeting people through these projects is gives people a sense of achievement and a better connection to their community and improves their well-being. And the last outcome in this group is that people would have volunteered time, which is pretty self-evident. The third group of outcomes are the wider benefits, I guess, that a project can perhaps achieve. The first one in this group is about the environmental impacts of a project, and that those would be reduced, again, hopefully fairly self-evident. The second outcome is about more people and a wider range of people having engaged in heritage as a result of the project. So really widening participation, more diverse audiences involving people from different backgrounds, perhaps different ages than you have in the past, these sorts of things. The third outcome is about improving places so that they're better and improved for people to live in and work in and indeed visit. The fourth outcome is about the economic benefits of a project, and what we're seeking is that there's an increase in economic activity in the area as a direct result of the project. And the last outcome that we have is about resilience, that your organisation is more able to withstand challenges, respond to opportunities, that it's a stronger organisation going forward as a result of the project. So those are our 14 outcomes, and projects don't need to achieve all of them by any means, but hopefully there's a lot of flexibility across those 14, which some projects, by their very nature, will be better placed to meet some of those outcomes, certainly more strongly than others, and that's fine. There's flexibility across our programs to allow for that. There's 3 programs that I just want to touch on this morning, which, as I say, I think are most relevant to this area. The first one is Resilient Heritage, which we launched just last summer, so it's been open for a while. It is a program that aims to develop and sustain heritage organisations, aiming to create a more sustainable heritage sector, really. The second program, Heritage Grants, is for grants over £100,000, and that's sort of our core program, let's say, for larger heritage projects. And the third program I want to touch on is Heritage Enterprise, and the key focus of that is about the economic benefit that a project can deliver when developing a heritage asset. We have 11 different programs, and the handout that hopefully you'll have seen is available lists those the range of programs that we have. The other 2 that I would just draw your attention to is our small grants program, Sharing Heritage, which is from £3,000 to £10,000 for small community projects. The next step up is the Our Heritage program, grants from £10,000 to £100,000. And if you're interested in those, then please just get in touch. The Resilience program, Resilient Heritage, is grants from £3,000 to £250,000. There are no deadlines. The aim of this program is about creating stronger organisations. And so it's all of the different aspects of that, whether that's strategic review and change, building skills, improving governance, improving financial sustainability. It's all about creating resilience. Part of it might be focused on looking at the viability of a larger project going forward, and that can be supported through this program, but it should be part of a wider improvement program for the organisation. We have what's called a strength checker for organisations. There's a link on our website. So particularly if you're looking for funding over £10,000 through this program, I would recommend that you have a look at that strength checker and go through the tool of questions that it has, just to get a sense of where your organisation is at, what its weaknesses are, what its strengths are, and what you need to focus on. There are 3 outcomes for this programme that your project must achieve, and they are that heritage would be better managed as a result of the project, people would have developed skills, and the organisation would be more resilient. The next programme I was going to touch on is Heritage Grants. So as I say, this is sort of our core programme for grants of over £100,000. It involves a 2-round application process with a development stage between the first and second rounds. You can put an application in at any point, but if you want your application to be considered at a particular meeting, there are effectively deadlines. And the decision would be taken by either the Committee for Scotland if your request is under 2 million, or the UK Board of Trustees if it's over 2 million. The project should achieve at least one outcome for heritage people and communities, so we don't define which outcome, but one in each of those groups. The project needs to be responding to a clear need or opportunity. That needs to be evidenced. And as I was saying, it needs to be viable, well planned, financially realistic, and good value for money. And of course, that's where collaboration and partnerships come into play. And it's great to be doing the session with other organisations today. And the last programme is Heritage Enterprise, and that's focused really on economic benefit from the development of a heritage asset. It has the same grant range as heritage grants, and it has the same process as well. The outcomes of this programme reflect that economic focus. The weighted outcome for heritage is that heritage would be in better condition, so physical improvements to the heritage. That people would have developed skills is the weighted outcome for people who have learned about heritage. And the third group for communities, what we're really focused on is the impact on the local economy. The grant funding under this programme is based on what's called a conservation deficit. And just to briefly explain that, that's where the existing value of a heritage asset plus the cost of bringing it back into use is greater than the end value of that asset. So it's where essentially it doesn't make financial sense to develop that heritage asset. We're then saying we can potentially make grant funding available to fill that gap. We do require what's called a viability appraisal for the round 1 application, and then a development appraisal for the second round. And there's guidance on what those documents should include on our website. The key thing about a round 1 application to heritage grants or heritage enterprise is that it should be a sound idea and really strong, detailed proposals for the development stage. It can be outline proposals for the main project, but the development stage, the development work that you're seeking to do between the first and second round in order to work the project up should be presented in detail. And really strong proposals for that, so that we understand how you're thinking about it, how you're approaching it, the project, and we're convinced on that basis, as well as the overall idea, of course. Where to start with us? There's lots of information on the website, as you'll see. If you're trying to navigate your way around or find anything, please just give us a call. That's the office number there, and of course we're happy to chat to you about your project idea as well. The more formal process that we have and what we would ask you to do when you feel you're ready is to submit a project inquiry online through our website, and then someone in the development team will get back to you with detailed advice specific to your project, either by email. We might give you a telephone call if we want to chat through things. We might be able to meet with you and do that if we think it would help, or indeed we've got now video facilities that we can do it online as well, if that would be useful. So please do get in contact if you have any project ideas and you want to find out about our funding. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Diane. I'm now going to hand over to Pauline Megson of Historic Environment Scotland, who's going to cover some of the Historic Environment Scotland grants. I should say, in the meantime, we, Heritage Lottery Fund, have also provided a handout which attendees will be able to see on the right-hand side of their screen under the handout section, and you can download that and keep it. And Pauline, over to you.
Thanks, Ailey, and thanks for having me today. In the grants team at Historic Environment Scotland, we have a development side of the team. And while I'll talk about the development side of things, prior to grant being awarded, And I'll also focus largely on buildings, as that's where I think the focus of asset transfer is. While we've got all the information on our website, we very much encourage groups to get in touch with us at an early stage. So we look for them to send us an email with details of the project or pick up the phone. We're very happy to meet to discuss projects. We can provide advice in terms of maybe giving an indication on a project's strengths and weaknesses at an early stage. We do this because we want to see that once an application is made, that it's been given the best chance possible. So that's why we're very keen to engage at an early stage, and therefore we may be less likely to see unsuccessful applications resulting in wasted time and effort on the part of community groups. The kind of advice that we can give can relate to governance. That is, is the group constituted to the best effect? The project vision, does it sound realistic? We can signpost groups to other similar comparable projects, which is a great way to learn about risks, challenges, and tried and tested ideas. We can review reports such as options appraisals, feasibility studies, and business plans. And of course, we can give advice on conservation and planning matters in conjunction with the local authority. Our main grant is the Historic Environment Repair Grant, which is for funds up to £500,000. This is for a grant towards the repair of the external envelope of a building. That's what we describe as the eligible works. Work that needs to be done soon because the building fabric is in poor condition, contributing to the at-risk status of the building. Our grant will contribute to making the building wind and watertight so that it can be brought back into use. And we expect repairs to be carried out appropriately using traditional methods and materials, a like-for-like approach. We don't fund new work because our priority is repairing historic fabric. But we also consider the proposed end uses very carefully. We won't give a grant to simply repair a building in itself. We need to know why it's necessary to repair this building now and what our grant will do to unlock the potential of the building. So we need to know about the project in detail, what the end uses will deliver in terms of benefits for local people and the place. And this needs to be set out in a grant application. We need to know that once the building is repaired, that the end users will be able to keep going and that there is a clear need for them and that enough income will be generated through the end users to cover running costs and maintenance in the long term. We're also really keen to hear about how groups might be using a building in the meantime, because meanwhile uses demonstrate engagement with the community, help to build interest in the project, and can test out the demand for the end uses and activity. It also helps groups get to know the building and think about how it could be used and adapted to deliver what you need to do. It's not always possible, we understand, but there are some good cases of that going on at the moment. At St Margaret's Church in Braemar, the local trust has developed a performing arts programme using the former church as a venue, and this is before any major work to the building has taken place. It does mean that it can be a cold and damp experience going to see a performance sometimes, but the group has demonstrated that there is interest in the area for this kind of activity, and they've also tested their abilities in developing and promoting an arts programme, putting on performances, catering for guests, and gradually building a reputation in the area for high quality musical events. It might sound obvious, but we give grant towards the repair of historic sites and buildings, those that have character and are important to the local area. A building doesn't have to be A-listed to get a grant though. We consider a range of criteria, and if you have an excellent project with real and meaningful benefits built in, then you could be successful if your building is C-listed or even unlisted. Architectural or historic significance play their part too, of course, and this can be a major part of the project and the activity. For example, bringing a historic mill back into use, recording the stories of those who were involved as part of the project, reinvigorating traditional textile production, and contributing to the local economy all adds to the opportunities for learning and development and creates a great project, as well as bringing a historic asset back into use. We want traditional building skills to be kept going, and we want to help keep the demand for these skills. So if there is scope for this in a project, then this will count towards being successful in an application. Traditional buildings can have a long life with appropriate repair and regular maintenance, but they also have a ready-made sense of place, identity and history. This can help shape a project and the activities around it. At Govanhill Baths in Glasgow, the community were up in arms about their local pools being closed. They valued the function of the building rather than wanting to save it for its own architectural sake. Through occupying the building for nearly 15 years now, the Trust has grown from a campaigning organisation to one that is now running a range of successful meanwhile uses which are truly community-led, as well as raising significant funds, some from Historic Environment Scotland, towards refurbishing the building. The needs of local people in Govanhill are being met through a range of activities including fitness and sports, wellbeing, sewing workshops, excuse me, cookery classes, art and drama, etc. And crucially providing spaces in the building before the capital works have taken place where people from diverse backgrounds can come and meet each other, socialise and develop new skills and confidence. The building itself, a B-listed Edwardian swimming pool complex with traditional slipper baths, is almost irrelevant, but it was the catalyst and provides the hook for the project and many of its activities. So having a historic asset at the heart of a project is also the key to unlocking significant capital funding from Historic Environment Scotland, HLF and others. To get to the position of being ready for a capital grant, of course, a huge amount of important development work needs to be done first. At HES, we don't directly provide that development funding, but we do give this through the Architectural Heritage Fund. We give the AHF £180,000 a year, but we're hoping to increase that, hoping to double that this year to provide additional funding specifically for communities. The Architectural Fund distributes this development grant in Scotland, and this is for the sustainable reuse of built heritage for the benefit of communities. We work closely with the Architectural Heritage Fund, with Gordon, who you can see in the slide, and we hope to see that the development work that's funded through the AHF, that will lead to successful applications to us and the HLF in due course. As well as offering grants and loans, the AHF offers advice at an early stage too. So there is a lot of advice there, but there's only one Gordon Barr, and we share our advice and mentoring across the board and work closely with the HLF as well on that. There are two main pots of funding at the Architectural Heritage Fund: the Project Viability Grant of up to £5,000 and the Project Development Grant of up to £25,000. And these funds are, the key objectives that the AHF want to support are to support people, communities and organisations to take ownership, to repair and to adapt historic buildings and places for new sustainable uses, to attract more investment for the conservation and sustainable reuse of the UK's architectural heritage, to inspire the start-up and growth of new community enterprises that utilise historic buildings and places for public benefit. For both these grants, the AHF will consider funding any work that is essential for taking a project forward towards the goal of revitalising a historic building. And this can include, and I'll just read through the main range: employment of a project coordinator, fees for consultants needed to help progress plans, such as an architect, QS, structural engineer, or mechanical and electrical engineer, property valuation by an RICS registered valuer, fundraising consultants, business planning consultants, costs associated with developing a bid to the HLF or other capital funders, such as preparing an activity plan, training plan, or conservation management plan. Costs of community engagement work, for example, pop-up events or consultations. Legal costs, where this is critical in establishing ownership or the viability of proposed uses, or for advice on governance. VAT costs that cannot be reclaimed, and an organisation's overheads and administration costs. So that's just a summary of the pre-application stage, covering Architectural Heritage Fund and Historic Environment Scotland, and I'll hand over to Thomas to talk about the big picture and once you have a grant. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Pauline. Also, let's get this presentation up and running. There we go. So good morning, and thank you all of those of you who have tuned in today to listen to these presentations. My name, I'll just reiterate that, is Thomas Knowles, and I'm the Head of Grants with Historic Environment Scotland. And I want to talk further today about some of the help that we as an organisation can provide towards organisations, community groups, seeking to take on properties through asset transfers. I'm going to touch on what is our main programme, what is important to Historic Environment Scotland, and how we make our decisions. Ultimately, I manage an annual budget of some £14.5 million a year, which we as an organisation apportion across a number of grant programmes, all of which have been designed to promote, enhance and protect Scotland's historic environment. These programmes range from archaeology all the way up through to urban regeneration concepts. But the most pertinent today, and the one which we will be looking at, is, as Pauline has outlined, the Historic Environment Repair Grant. This fund is available and makes awards of up to £500,000. It has a de minimis number, which is the smallest grant that you can apply for, from £10,000. And really what we're looking at here is to be in a position to offer up to 40% of what we classify as eligible works. So eligible works for us are effectively, as Pauline's already outlined, the external envelope of a building, i.e. making something wind and watertight so that it can have a sustainable reuse in the future. Just to try to clarify some of those external envelopes that we're talking about, things such as roof works, windows, stonework repairs, rainwater goods and so forth would all classify. Ultimately, owners of historic buildings can apply for financial help from us to help meet the cost of high quality repairs or conservation works made by specialist craftspeople using traditional skills and materials. And really, as Pauline has already stated, our aim here is to conserve original features of buildings. So, in order to qualify for consideration of a Historic Environment Repair Grant, the building must be of significant architectural or historic importance. That is effectively what we need to see in order to start the conversation. Any repairs or conservation which is being proposed must be urgently needed, so we need to have a demonstration of that need. And you also must be able to demonstrate the need for grant support to enable the repairs or conservation to go ahead, i.e. there is a financial background check that will be taking place in order to ascertain whether there is a financial need from us to help the project progress. It is worth pointing out, and it should always be remembered, that assessment of applications to us is a competitive process that will take into account any wider benefits the repair or conservation project may provide. And I've just listed some of the benefits here that we're really looking for. And these are not mutually exclusive to any others, but they give a rough flavour of some of the things that we're looking at. So we're looking at enhancing our public access. We're looking at benefits for communities. We're really keen to see social and economic regeneration occurring through projects which we are funding. We are promoting quality, and that's quality within the entire project. And we're looking to help develop knowledge and skills. Much like the Scottish Land Fund and the Heritage Lottery Fund, Historic Environment Scotland has implemented an outcomes framework across its grants programmes. Outcomes are the benefits or changes that your project will deliver through its delivery, and are considered to be effectively the return on investment made in your initiative. And outcomes help us align investment decisions taken by my team with the strategic outcomes, not only of my organisation, but of my ultimate funder, the Scottish Government. So if Historic Environment Scotland is to contribute to the achievement of wider strategic government priorities, our own corporate and grant programme outcomes must align. And I've put up on this slide the Historic Environment Scotland's corporate outcomes, which we hope to see any application to us show work towards achieving. So in developing our outcomes from this point for the grants programme, we have identified specific outcomes that we would expect funded projects or organisations to deliver that relate to these 5 corporate outcomes. And in preparing your application to Historic Environment Scotland, you should clearly describe the outcomes that your project will deliver and ultimately specify the change that you expect to deliver, i.e. measures of success. Historic Environment Scotland will assess applications for funding on the extent to which they deliver against the outcomes which have been listed. What I've put up now is a slide which effectively should help people link towards some further information if required. Pauline's mentioned previously that early conversations with us about projects is gratefully received because it helps us to clearly identify what projects are coming in over the horizon, but also it helps us identify sources of information and potential startup funding to help projects develop to the point where they can come in for a historic environment repair grant. So we have a dedicated grants hotline, which is a single point of contact into my team, which is on 0131 668 8801. And I would strongly recommend that anyone with any particular queries or who wants a bit more information gives that number a ring. Additionally, the link below that telephone number is the link straight in to our website, where there is more information, specific information on the Historic Environment Repair Grant itself. And then the link below that is our Outcomes Framework document. And you will find within this Outcomes Framework document much more information about the specific grant programme outcomes that we have identified, which will help you tell us what your project will achieve and how it will help Historic Environment Scotland achieve its outcomes. So that finishes my presentation, so I'm going to hand back now, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Do you have anything to say, yourself, Diane and Pauline, have anything to say on how yourself and Heritage Lottery Fund work together?
I'll actually take that one as well, if that's okay. I think, obviously, our two organisations, it is worth remembering that we are different organisations. Ultimately, we're set up in different ways, and we answer to different structures, management and oversight structures. So whilst we share many of the same ambitions, we do have differing outcomes which we're trying to achieve, and we also have different reporting structures. So there is a lot of collaboration which goes on between the two funders, Heritage Lottery Fund and Historic Environment Scotland, and I'll quickly touch on some of that collaboration. But it is worth noting that because we're separate organisations, we still do have separate application forms and separate processes for looking at those application forms, and also separate processes for making awards. So, notwithstanding that, we both realise that we are working in the same areas, and with our shared ambitions for the sector, we do hold very regular meetings between the grants teams within both organisations, and it's worth remembering that at those meetings we do share a lot of information about what's in respective applications. So if you are looking at making an application to both organisations, it's good to try to ensure that the information presented to both parties is the same, because we will have an element of sharing that data, and there's nothing as disappointing as finding out that different funders have been given different informations. Also, what we do in these meetings is it gives us both an opportunity to do some horizon scanning, and this we're finding absolutely invaluable, because effectively this is where we start looking at where and when applications come in, which helps us with our own internal budget profiles. Okay, I think that's about it.
Okay, thank you very much, Thomas. If anyone has any questions, please make sure you're putting them in the questions box. I'm now going to hand over to Tony Crosby, who's the Scottish Land Fund Operations Manager, who's going to talk about how the Land Fund works with heritage projects. Tony, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Ailey. Good morning, everyone, and thanks to everyone for a really interesting presentation today. We've seen that there's a real commonality and a real crossover between the sort of fund's objectives here, and I think this is, for us, this is the start of a discussion about a way forward. We want to try and make it easier for applicants, and we want to try and encourage, I guess, synergy and to avoid duplication, particularly duplication of work needed for funding applications. So what we're thinking is that when heritage projects are referred through to the Scottish Land Fund, what we'll try to establish early on is, well, what kind of heritage project is it? So is it a listed building, or is it in a conservation area? We'll establish, is it a project for the benefit of the community, and like the other funders have spoken about this morning, will it be community driven? Will it be able to demonstrate social and economic impact? We'll also, bearing in mind, as Pauline had pointed out, that there is only one Gordon Barbell, we'll ask if people have contacted if it's a project that could perhaps be supported by some of the project viability grant activities. Have they been in touch with the Architectural Heritage Fund? Equally, have they considered Historic Environment Scotland or HLF for the sort of pre and post acquisition support that we spoke about this morning as well? Thanks, Ailey. Next slide, please. And as Ailsa said, we've got case officers throughout Scotland, so we jumped ahead one, thank you. As Ailsa said at the start, we've got case officers right throughout Scotland, so we will be discussing applicant and project viability very early on with other heritage funding partners, as we spoke about this morning. And we'll agree where proposals and projects sit on the risk spectrum that Ailsa mentioned, from projects that have a mean time use through to projects that will be of no immediate use without a lot of significant development funding. And we'll try and be clear with applicants as early as possible which projects are the right fit and what the chances of success are likely to be. We will aim to liaise now with other funding partners throughout the application and assessment process for heritage projects. We're conscious that we're in an environment where we're limited by time and resource. And what I think has been interesting this morning is that very much we've all sort of spoken the same language about projects that we're looking to support. Ailsa asked the question, how do we work better with other heritage funders, because we're all about more than just the money. and she highlighted the outcomes that we're looking for around environmental, economic, social outcomes, stronger engagement with communities, community empowerment, sustainability. Diane spoke about projects that make a lasting difference to heritage, people and communities, and this, again, the same words are coming up around people, skills, volunteering, learning, economic sustainability, community, and Pauline and Thomas did the same with talking about the Architectural Heritage Fund and the Historic Environment Repair Grant. So I think there's a real opportunity here for us to work together to ensure that the projects have got a clear pathway towards getting the outcomes that they're looking for. I'll wrap up there because I think we're rapidly running out of time, and there'll clearly be plenty of questions. So I think the last slide that we have today, Ellie, is just some contact details for all three organisations. Scottish Land Fund, if you're already working with us, then clearly you'll have a case officer that you'll be working with, and you can contact them directly. If you're a new inquiry, then we would ask that you go through the Big Lodge inquiry line, which sort of filters the applications through to us. Okay, thanks very much.
All there is left to do is to thank all of the presenters. They've given up some of their time from across the country to present here today. So thank you very much to all of you, and I'm going to sign off now.
Thank you.
Enjoy your pancake day, everyone.